pyramid. Everybody said that in the early stages, all we had were handmade tools. Sheikh Anthony Up, the Senegalese physicist, the greatest of living African historians, he's dead now, the greatest of 20th century African historian, he pointed out that an iron hoe had been found in the interstices of the Great Pyramid, and he pointed to other iron objects, and he showed that there had to have an advanced smelting process in order to cut the stone. I went to Egypt last summer, and that was something that I wanted to see with my living eyes. I watched that stone. I watched that granite. I watched the quarries at Aswan. And I looked at the standardization of the stone. And I said to myself, how on earth could these people cut this stone with copper and bronze tools? It is impossible. But the Japanese, they decided to cut the stone with the best of handmade tools from ancient times. The tools broke. Do you know what the Japanese had to do? They had to use air jackhammers, 20th century technology, in order to cut the stone. Then they said, everybody thought, all they had to do now, the Egyptians, now the Africans with their muscles, picks up this stone and put it on the barges. The Japanese tried to put it on the barges capsized. Now they're dealing with 2-ton stones. The Africans didn't just deal with 2-ton stones, they went up to 50-ton stones. The Japanese, using 2-ton stones, could not get them on the barges without the barges capsizing. So they had to use 20th century technology, steamboats. So now they said, all right, we got our air jackhammers and we got our steamboats, let us proceed. Then they got to the shore and tried to take the stone out to the sand in the desert to put up the little pyramid. Do you know what happened? The stone sank in the mud. Then they dragged it out of the mud, then it sank in the sand. They had to find 20th century cranes, the power cranes, in order to drag the bloody thing out of the sand. Then they tried to put it in alignment. It chipped, it cracked, it broke. Then they brought the helicopter. Couldn't put it in alignment. Then they went back and looked with humility at what the early Africans had done. Do you know the casing stones of the Great Pyramid? Not a single one of them is chipped or cracked or scratched. And do you know what is the alignment the Africans achieved in those early times, which the Japanese today, the best in modern technology, cannot achieve? 1/1000th of an inch of mathematical perfection in the alignment of the stone. The only people today who achieve that precision are jewelers with microscopes cutting fine gems. Do you know what happened? The modern Egyptians who had called these people in, they chased them out. They left a terrible mess in the desert, all these pieces of stone and holes and all sorts of things like that. They chased them out. So do not think you are dealing with something that people are going to come to terms with easily. There's a big effort still. I had to deal with a lot of professors. When I was called on the radio, I said, look, I don't have any time. When I get to the conference, I will talk. No, Dr. Van Sertima, we want to know if Ramesses II is a black man. I said, I don't want to comment on Ramesses II until we come to the conference, but I want to give you evidence that the Egyptian civilization in that early critical period was black and dominated by blacks. Do you know how they reported it in the newspaper? Van Sertima said that the race of Ramesses II was uncertain. Anyway, he didn't get away with it because I exposed him when I got to Dallas. Just as the Egyptian Minister of Culture is not going to get away with it either. Because when my wife and I were in Cairo last year, We decided to take pictures of wigs in the Cairo Museum. Now there are two things you can use to prove the early Egyptians were black. Take skin from the mummies, which is what Diop did, using the melanin dosage test, or go to the book X-raying the Pharaohs, where they have microfiche, things of the Pharaohs, and there's a special photographic process where you can actually see what the mummy looked like. They're black. They would not allow us to see the mummies anymore. You're not allowed to see the mummies. They said, Sadat said that it is not a good thing. It is humiliating. It is grotesque. Poor Sadat. What Sadat said, I could repeat. Sadat said when he was here, I'm a black man, and I'm the first true pharaoh in 2,000 years. And he said that because he knows that his mother was Sudanic. He is one of the few of them who could claim to be a real Egyptian. He never had anything to say about the mummies. They didn't want us to photograph those wigs. That's the museum, the great museum of the world. Everybody in the world goes to Egypt. That is the beginning of great civilization. And yet, catalogued as everything was the wigs were not catalogued. And my wife and I were photographing those wigs for half an hour. Here comes this roly-poly gentleman walking straight up into my vision. And I nearly ran him over. I didn't know who he was. I didn't even see him. And considering the way he behaved afterwards, I'm sorry I didn't knock him over. He wanted to know if we had permits for our cameras. So I said, my dear fellow, how could we come in here without a permit? You can't come through the door without a camera permit. Wanted to know if my wife was using flash. I said, no. He said, is it a video camera? I said, first of all, it's not a video. And secondly, if it were, she would have a permit for it. May I see it, please? So we showed it to him. We even had to show him the passes. And then finally he couldn't create an incident, which probably is what he was trying to do. He said, okay, I'm sorry. I just want you to know that I'm the curator of the Cairo Museum. I wanted to say, big deal. And do you know who I am? But do you know what those wigs are? They're African hair braided. It's called lion's mane. Some lioness decided to braid her mate's hair. Now, could you imagine that? A lioness braiding a lion's hair? It's braided hair and they call it lion's mane. They would not put it in the catalog because those are the pieces of evidence they don't want to deal with. They don't want to deal with that. Those are the wigs that were on the pharaoh's heads at times, on the heads of priests and priestesses. And when it comes to the science, that is so startling. It's not only the pyramid that stuns us. There is a building, the largest single building on earth, even to this day. It's known as the Labyrinth. It is found near a lake. It was built in the Middle Kingdom, somewhere around 2000 BC. Do you know that it has 3,000 rooms, 1,500 rooms above and 1,500 rooms below? Herodotus tells us that. And in 1888, about 100 years ago, Petrie, the great British archaeologist, went down into this labyrinth. He said that if you were to take all of the temples, the great temples and cathedrals of Europe, you could put it in that thing. Built by Africans. So that I want you to be aware of this incredible power that lies in man when man is together. We are no longer together. We are a shattered people. But we can come together again in consciousness. We can get a different kind of wholeness, a different kind of crystallization, a different kind of sharpness, a different kind of power